partner Business Standard. Broadcast partner YouTube.
Welcome to the last of our pre-budget tax specials. Today we're discussing black money. Is it India's unobtainium? And to answer that question, I'm joined by Professor R. Vaidyanathan. He's Professor of Finance and Control at the Indian Institute of Management in Bangalore. G.C. Srivastava joining me from Delhi, former Joint Secretary, Foreign Tax and Tax Research at the Central Board of Direct Taxes or CBDT. And we have an international expert on the show, Raymond Baker, the Director of Global Financial Integrity, an institution that works to curtail illicit financial flows and enhance global development and security. Gentlemen, to all three of you, a very warm welcome. Professor Vaidyanathan, I'd like to start with you first. Now, every year before the annual central government budget exercise, a whisper campaign is unleashed which pushes for or makes the case to some extent for an amnesty or a voluntary disclosure type of scheme. Now, as a tax-paying, law-abiding citizen, I detest the very thought of an amnesty scheme, but many people make the case that it is probably the fastest and best way to bring those billions of dollars stashed overseas back into the country and into the tax net. Are you in favor of an amnesty scheme?
Now, let me be very frank with you, Monica. This government's credibility is extremely low. So when the credibility of the government is very low, any type of amnesty introduced will be looked at with cynicism, that it is to protect their own clan and their own group. I don't think government will come out with any type of amnesty at this juncture.
Your response is based on the prevailing environment regarding corruption, scams, etc. But as a mechanism to bring back money that is otherwise inaccessible, are you in favor of amnesty schemes at all, Professor Vaidyanathan?
Not at all, because amnesty automatically implies that we condone what has taken place, one. Second is, even without amnesty, the money is coming in through several routes.
All right. Mr. Srivastava, Professor Vaidyanathan is not in favor of an amnesty. I'm not in favor of an amnesty. The Supreme Court of India is not in favor of an amnesty. But do you believe that may be the easiest and fastest way to be able to tax illicit flows of money that have escaped this country?
No, I don't think that's the right course. For the simple reason, I'll give three reasons for that. One, that any such a scheme erodes the efficacy of the system and the enforcement machinery. Two, it is really, the honest taxpayers feel cheated about it once the scheme is on. Third, you are not going to gain anything out of it except garnering some revenues, and that too, it is very highly doubtful how much revenues you are really going to garner. So, but as a really long-term measure, one can never advocate for such schemes.
Raymond Baker, the GFI has estimated that between the year 1948 to 2008, India lost a total $213 billion in illicit financial flows, the net present value of which is likely to be approximately $462 billion. That's the amount of money that Indian taxpayers have stashed away abroad, or rather I should say Indian tax evaders have stashed away abroad. Is maybe the most effective way to bring this money back an amnesty or a voluntary disclosure type of scheme?
Amnesty procedures have had a very mixed record. For example, in the United States, an amnesty several years ago brought back a little over $300 billion under the provisos that money be invested in plant and equipment and so forth. It was not invested in plant and equipment. So the return of that money instead got spent on executive bonuses and acquisitions of other companies and so forth. It had little positive effect on the U.S. economy. In our thinking, the more important question is what steps will be taken to curtail the ongoing outflow of illicit money from India.
All right, that's an important issue, and I'll come to that in the second half of this discussion. Right now, I'd like to focus on the use of amnesty schemes. You make the point, Mr. Baker, that they're not necessarily the best means, these voluntary disclosure type of schemes, to be able to curb these illicit flows. And yet, till as recently as last year, we've seen countries like the US design and implement several offshore voluntary disclosure schemes that are designed to bring back money into the tax net. Countries continue to persist with this as a short-term fix to a very long-term problem.
The United States has gone a great deal past voluntary disclosure. The United States has passed legislation requiring foreign financial institutions to report to the United States earnings by U.S. depositors on their foreign bank accounts. This is an extremely aggressive procedure and does serve to bring into the United States information that was never available in the past.
So is it your case, Mr. Baker, then, that amnesty schemes, while they provide short-term fixes, must be accompanied with other strong enforcement measures, because on their own they're not able to achieve much?
I think that's fairly stated. FACTA is proving to be very useful in the United States. Furthermore, the way in which the United States went after the Swiss bank, UBS, has proven to be very effective. There have been a great many voluntary disclosures of overseas accounts following the prosecution, the indictment of UBS. So aggressive measures can have benefit.
Professor Vaidyanathan, all of us agree that amnesty is not the response, it is not the answer, it is not the solution. Then what must India do to be able to effectively bring back, if not all, substantial amounts of that $462 billion, and that's a conservative estimate because a CBI leader has said it could be $500 billion. What do we do to bring that money back? Have we done enough in the last few years to at least make a beginning?
We require to have a political will. You know that in our system there is Sama, Dana, Bed, Danda. We have always been requesting, cajoling and other things. We have a 1.5 trillion gorilla economy. So two things we should do. We should take the lead in a campaign to close down all these tax havens. These tax havens are red light districts of the global financial architecture. Let us be very clear about it. Second is, we must arm twist countries like Switzerland and Cayman Island to have geographical disclosure of the depositors, not only of shares and bonds, but pearls, diamonds, gold and other type of jewelry which is lying from India in their lockers. We must take punitive action against those countries and those institutions since they have substantial amount of economic interest in India. I think the time has come when India has to act and not just to sign these double taxation treaties only, which are prospective in nature.
Mr. Srivastav, do you agree with any of the measures laid out by Professor Vaidyanathan? For instance, shut down black tax havens or arm twist Switzerland, when in fact we've spent the last 2 or 3 years laboring to be able to complete signing several information exchange agreements, work on which has yet to be finished?
Yeah, that could be a very welcome idea to get complete information of all accounts stashed abroad.
Is it a feasible, realistic idea, Mr. Srivastav?
That's the question, because do we have that authority or that influence globally to exercise the degree of influence which US did and to obtain plenty of information about the accounts abroad?
Given that we don't have that influence and therefore we cannot undertake the measures, some of them extreme, that Professor Vaidyanathan is suggesting, what is it that India can do effectively to bring this money back? Because we have worked on information exchange agreements, but they are going to yield any kind of information and therefore money only over the longer term.
These exchange information agreements will give the information in specific cases, and then we have to go hunting all those cases where we find some material to indicate that there is money abroad. But then to get a list of account holders or to get some data indicating, I mean, maybe that in the case of Germany, as we have got some data, that's a different aspect, but it is very difficult to expect that we would have some data bank on which to work on.
Even if you do get information, to be able to navigate bilateral treaties, international laws, and find a way to bring that money back. We are not the United States of America. We cannot take action against UBS like they have. We are going to find it far, far tougher to be able to enforce any of those things. So what are we left with as realistic propositions? Raymond Baker, that question goes to you.
I agree with putting increasing pressure on tax havens. I do think that the tax information exchange agreements, India has been very aggressive in signing these over the past couple of years. I think that that's helpful, but I don't think it's helpful in bringing back the black money. The international mechanisms for returning assets deposited abroad, often by illicit means, is very, very cumbersome. And may I ask, what is the point of trying to bring back the black money if the mechanisms for its ongoing outflow continuing to exist? Frankly, I think the cart is before the horse in this case. The more important goal is to curtail the ongoing outflow, take steps that curtail the outflow, and then turn attention toward recovering the money that has been deposited abroad. That's far more difficult. Whereas curtailing the ongoing outflow can be accomplished with some straightforward means. Prime Minister Singh in the G20 meeting in France last year called for automatic exchange of tax information between countries. This already exists in the European Union. India is big enough and powerful enough to make such a request of its major trading partner countries and push for such information exchange. This goes far toward curtailing the ongoing outflow, which in my judgment is the first step toward attracting the money that has gone abroad to return.